Today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are gathered and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to the City Governance Committee meeting of the 2nd of December 2020. I declare the meeting open at 10:54. I would like to advise meeting attendees that this meeting is being audio recorded. I note that Councillors Raven and Bradley have submitted a leave of absence request due to their attendance at committal hearings. Do any other councillors have a leave of absence to declare? And I note that Mayor Power is not in the room at the moment. Oh, he's just returned, and same with Councillor Bannon. They have just returned. There being none, I now move a motion that Councillors Raven and Bradley be granted a leave of absence in accordance with section 5.3C of the Local Government and Committee Meeting Code. Is there a seconder for this motion? Councillor Karansky. Councillor Karansky has seconded. Do any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? I now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And that has been unanimous. I will now refer to item 4.1. Can the Finance Manager, Ms Caroline Bugg, please enter discussions? And before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? I note that item 4.1 is confidential, and I note that it is considered necessary to take the discussion of this item into a closed session as the report and attachments contain detailed budget information. Do any councillors wish to move into closed session for this item, and if applicable, provide an overview of your intended discussions if it is different to the prepared motion? I remind councillors that if there is no desire to discuss the confidential matters, there is no requirement to move into closed session. I now open the floor to councillors. All right, I would like to now pass over to Ms Bugg to open discussion.
Thank you, Chair. This first item is the Budget Amendment Report. It reflects the outcomes of the first Budget Amendment. It is a reflection of where we feel we will pardon me, end the financial year. As the first amendment, this is historically a conservative amendment with branches adjusting delivery programs throughout the remainder of the year. We've started the financial year with a budget surplus of $1.272 million. This amendment is forecasting a surplus of $928,000 or a surplus of $686,000 if the trainee budget is adopted. I'm happy to take any questions you have on the report.
Councillors, are there any questions? No? Is there a mover for the report's motion as displayed on the screen? Oh, apologies, Councillor Karansky.
That's fine. Apologies. I just had a quick question with Carolyn. Carolyn, I note that the surplus has reduced quite considerably since we last came together as a council. I wonder if you could talk to that for a moment?
Yes, certainly. There are items identified in the report that are the significant items of movement. The ones that have a negative impact on the surplus overall are the interest earned, so it's going down by $1.5 million. There are a number of drivers of that. We're not particularly sure what one driver is strongest in that area, but obviously the Reserve Bank has kept interest rates at 0.1%, so it is particularly low. There's also a tax equivalent reduction for waste of $920,000. There's legal services costs in DA for large legal processes happening in that branch. They weren't budgeted for. And Springwood Town Square feasibility study has been brought in for this budget amendment. So they all impact negatively on the surplus. They're offset obviously by the two positive amounts in additional revenue in DA, and also a large grant from Queensland Health regarding COVID.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Bugg. Are there any other questions from the councillors? There being none, is there a mover for the report's motion as displayed on the screen? Sorry, Councillor Powell.
Sorry. To the manager, in regard to the what you have listings there, have you got any other concerns that might come up in the near future? Is there anything that the officers are flagging down now?
No, I don't think there's any significant risks at the moment. We do flag a couple in our monthly report, month on month.
Yep.
But I don't think there's anything that's come from the budget amendment.
And the waste levy, is that going to continue to deteriorate?
We're working those numbers at the moment to determine whether we can. This is the adjustment made in the first budget amendment. We feel it's correct for the year, but we'll keep an eye on that and make any further adjustments.
And your estimate for the legal costs, is that going to deteriorate?
Again, it depends on where the cycle is in the legal process, so we don't budget for it until it's in front of the court.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Power. And again, are there any other questions from the councillors? No? Is there a mover for the report's motion as displayed on the screen? Councillor Power. Do we have a seconder for the motion that is on the screen? Councillor Hall. Councillor Hall has seconded. Do any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? No? I will now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. I will now refer to item 4.2. Before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, I will now refer to Finance Manager Ms Caroline Bugg to open public discussion. Ms Bugg, you may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. This report is the financial performance report to the end of October. The surplus to the end of October, the operating surplus to the end of October, was $7.9 million, driven predominantly by additional revenue against budget. Noting the significant variances here are in the area of DA fees. Water usage is still trending above long-term trends there. However, we're not making adjustments due to the unknown La Nina effect and what impact that may have on water usage. And also water recoverable income is above budget by $1.32 million. Expenses running to the end of October are fairly close to budget with a variance of only $268,000 or 0.1% difference to budget. There's no other significant elements, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering in relation to the debtor Point Corp Heritage Park proposal. Let me just get an understanding of if we know when that debt's likely to be paid.
Thank you, Councillor. Through the Chair, there are discussions afoot with Director at the moment. There are a number of issues with Point Corp. One of those issues is payment of this debt. We don't believe that there is any concern it won't be paid. It's just sort of wrapped up in a few issues at the moment. So,
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lane.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just a quick question. There's expenditure directly attributed to COVID-19. Are there any savings as a result of COVID-19 as well?
thank you. Through the Chair, we are trying to track savings. It's a bit more difficult because you can't actually say that's specific to COVID. So we are doing that work, but there's not much that we can identify at this point in time.
Thank you so much.
Are there any other questions, councillors? No? There being none, I will now... is there a mover for this motion displayed on the screen? Councillor Stamp has moved the motion. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lane has seconded. Do any councillors wish to speak to the motion? There being none, I will now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been voted unanimously. I will now refer to item 4.3, and before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, I will now refer to the Finance Manager, Ms Caroline Bugg, to open public discussion. Ms Bugg, you may proceed. Thank
Thank you, Chair. This report is in regard to the proposed rates and exemptions and concessions policy. This was discussed earlier at a councillor briefing. The documents are, for all intents and purposes, what was discussed at the briefing. There is additional feedback was incorporated into the procedure. Generally, the policy documents include definitions. You'll see in section 4 of the policy for both policies. The rates exemption is for full discount in general and separate charges only. All other charges remain payable. A concession is at a discounted rate of 20% or up to $500 per quarter, and this will be decided through resolution of council. All exemptions and concessions are a result of an application to council, and the application process is covered in the procedure. I would also note that the procedure includes an annual review of all properties with exemptions and concessions to ensure these continue to be applied in accordance with the relevant legislation and council resolution. Happy to take any questions.
Councillors, are there any questions? Mayor Power.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to ask the difference between a religious entity and a religious purpose. What is the difference?
The entity is the organisation, with the purpose being what they're providing to their followers.
Yep, subservient to a church type thing?
Correct.
Yep, and a religious purpose is just a church?
Yeah, the religion.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Mayor. You just triggered something that I had forgotten I was going to ask. If a religious organisation is meeting in council buildings, is there an exemption for them for any purpose? There's not. I can see the governance manager director already shaking his head. Does it then become a place of religion if there's over a specific number of meetings per year inside a council facility?
It's in relation to the ownership of the property, so it's still owned by council, and the predominant use of this facility would be for council-related purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mayor.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Mayor,
Madam
Councillor
Chair.
Power, sorry.
In regards to religious purpose, it's a fairly open discussion here. I'm just wondering, I mean, I thought that we would able to bring this down a little bit, because if you look at the definition here, you could quite easily define anything if someone wanted to as a religious purpose.
We are, through the chair, we are led by the Local Government Act as to what a religious...
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
Are there any other questions, councillors? Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms Bugg, I know that we've had a few discussions around this, but I just need to sort of check in again. With regard to a not-for-profit kindergarten who operates as a not-for-profit, and they're known as community kindergartens, is there any scope for those to be recognised as a not-for-profit in the way that they are, as opposed to a profit business?
Thank you. Through the chair. The use of the premise is determined through the land use code. We use that to determine that it's a childcare centre. A centre can apply for a concession or exemption if they feel the need. We will look at the procedure and bring it to council if it's a discretionary exemption or concession. Otherwise, if it doesn't meet the criteria of the procedure, that they won't be acknowledged as coming forward.
Okay, and again, and I know we have discussed this before, but being a kindergarten that needs to be operated by a 4-year trained teacher, just like in a school, that still doesn't qualify them as an educational facility in the same way that a school isn't.
No, through the chair, that's correct. They're not categorised the same way as a primary or secondary tertiary institution.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, any further questions? There being none, there is a motion on the screen. Is there a mover for this motion? Councillor Stemp has moved the motion. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hall has seconded. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this motion? I now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Okay, we'll go around the room. Mayor Power, are you for?
Yeah.
Councillor Lane, for?
For.
Councillor Russell,
Abstaining.
abstain. Councillor Karansky,
For.
Councillor Hall,
For.
Councillor Fraser,
For.
Councillor Heremiah,
Abstain.
Councillor Bannon,
For.
Councillor Stemp,
For.
Councillor Murphy,
For.
and I will vote for as well. Thank you. That has been carried. That marks the end of the Finance Manager's report. Is there any general business for Ms Bugg? No? Ms Bugg, do you have any general business for us?
No, thank you, Chair.
No? There being none, I will now move to the next item, and thank you, Ms Bugg. I will now refer to item 5.1. Can the Administration Manager, Ms Kay Sullivan, please enter discussions? And before we open discussions on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, I will now refer to the Administration Manager to open public discussion. Ms Sullivan, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, councillors. This item refers to Council's annual report for exception from quotes or tenders. I'll take the report as read, but want to highlight the following information. Council does conduct all procurement activities in line with local government regulations, and this is an annual report that tables an annual review of Council's exceptions that are due to expire in December 2020. The purpose of the report is to seek an exception in line with the current legislation. Council has introduced a new audit process with regard to our annual exceptions that looks to achieve a balance of value for money outcomes while making sure that we meet probity and accountability requirements. What this means is that Council is able to seek an exception from tenders or quotes if it resolves it is satisfied that there is only one supplier who is reasonably available, or Council resolves that because of the specialised or confidential nature of the services that are sought, it would be impractical or disadvantageous for Council to invite quotes or tenders. The existing sole supplier register has 104 suppliers on that. In comparison to last year, 12 suppliers have been removed and 10 new suppliers have been added. What this equates to is, as Council has around 2,200 suppliers, less than 5% of total suppliers are on this list, with just above 1.5% of total spend. The recommendation, therefore, is that Council enter into purchasing arrangements with these suppliers. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now open the floor to councillors for discussion, and we do have a few already. I have Councillor Karansky, followed by Councillor Stemp. Councillor Karansky.
Thank you, Kay. Just a couple of quizzes. In the first instance, page 119, I just note that there's a couple of areas that are highlighted on there, the date of the report and also the document ID. So just for your reference, that just might...
Thank you for picking that up.
Fantastic. And my question was run around process. So I know that some of these reports have been put together by program leaders, others have been put together by managers. what is the process? Is it the program leader puts the report to the manager, who then moves that up to the director, and which point it then comes across to you guys? Is that how it works?
The process is that the report can be prepared by a program leader or manager. It goes through the manager of that branch. It then comes to corporate procurement for them to review from a subject matter expertise perspective around procurement. If they don't believe the report has, I guess I'll say, enough veracity, they will go back and question the manager, and they will either accept the report or not for inclusion in the sole supplier list.
Thank you. And the sole supplier list, what interface does that list have with Council's Procurement and Appropriation Special Committee?
Moving forward, this report will be presented at the next Procurement and Appropriation Special Committee at the end of next year.
I understand. So they haven't had opportunity to view this report before it's come to us today?
Only through SLT, when I briefed all councillors that this was coming up.
Thank you.
Yes.
No further questions. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I can add additional information there. I've actually had a separate briefing with Councillor Heremiah. Yep.
Thank you, Kay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stemp, followed by Councillor Heremiah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had two quick questions. I'm just trying to get an understanding of the business need justification terminology. Can you explain that a bit clearer for me, what that means? Business, it's in the report, the business need justification, please.
As part of the new audit process, to add some veracity around what we were doing, the business need is why this particular product or service meets the sole supplier requirements and doesn't need to go out to tender or quote. So the business need, for example, may be from the water business that only one supplier supplies the parts that are actually required for a particular project or type of infrastructure. So the business need is why it meets the criteria for sole supplier list.
Okay. In the case of only one supplier reasonably available, how often do council check for new suppliers in the market?
So they will check every year for new suppliers in the market. So that's the desktop assessment. And then 30% of those on the sole supplier list will actually be required to do a deeper dive and provide that business justification again.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Heremiah, followed by Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll keep it short. I just wanted to pass my thanks on to the Administration Manager, the Corporate Procurement Program Leader and the Corporate Procurement Team for attaching the memorandums to the report and all the great work in the procurement space. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Heremiah. Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much through you, Chair. Kay, councillors have no role to play in providing a list of suppliers to council in any way, shape or form, do we? So we don't actually put forward a recommendation that, you know, someone should actually be put up for a potential contract.
That's correct, Councillor.
And we have no say in this list that's actually been put forward today.
That is correct. I would
Other than approving it in this
That's
form.
correct. It's based on subject matter expertise from individual branches, yes.
That's no worries. So the first thing that I did when I got this list was I tried to look for every director and person involved in the companies listed, and I couldn't always find them all. So in terms of potential conflicts, you know, you provided a fair amount of information. I just think that I don't know whether there's one step further that we need to go, but I just want to raise the fact that councillors in no way, shape or form have any influence over who is on this list. Is that correct? Yeah.
I'll take that on board, thank you, and I'll actually look to see if we can include any additional information moving
I'm
forward.
genuinely sorry, I'm not trying to make more work for you. It's just as part of our transparency, trying to check all the names of the directors and associates of those businesses was quite a challenge and a time-consuming task, so thank you.
I'm happy to look at ways that we can improve what we're doing. So,
Thanks.
thank
No, this is a great list, but thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Are there any other questions from the councillors? No? There being none, there is a motion on the screen. Do I have a mover for the motion? Councillor Bannon has moved the motion. Is there a seconder? Councillor Murphy has seconded. Do any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? No. I will now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Okay, we will go around the room. Mayor Power? For? Councillor Lane?
I'm abstaining.
Abstain. Councillor, I'm having a mental blank. Councillor Russell?
I'm for.
Councillor Kransky?
For.
Councillor Hall?
Abstaining.
Abstain. Councillor Fraser?
For.
Councillor Heremiah?
Abstain.
Councillor Bannon?
For.
Councillor Stemp?
Abstaining.
Councillor Murphy?
For.
And I will vote for as well. That is carried. That marks the end of the Administration Manager's reports. Is there any general business for Ms Sullivan? No? Ms Sullivan, do you have any general business for us?
Good today, thank you.
All right, there being none, I will now move on to the next item. Thank you, Ms Sullivan. I will now refer to item 6.1. Can the Acting Corporate Governance Manager, Ms Meryl Burke, please enter the discussions? And before we open discussions on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, I now refer to the Acting Corporate Governance Manager, Ms Meryl Burke, to open public discussions. Ms Burke, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, councillors. So the first report I'm presenting is in regards to the amendment for the staff interaction procedure and acceptable request guidelines. So there was some feedback from some staff in regards to making sure that they were able to provide you guys, councillors, with timely and accurate information, and to make that happen better, there's been a recommendation that that 4 coordinators be added to the acceptable request guidelines to be able to obtain advice. The Sport and Recreation Services Coordinator, the Leasing Coordinator, the Planning Coordinator, and the Risk Management and Insurance Coordinator.
Thank you. I will now open the floor to councillors for discussion. Councillor Kransky.
Thank you, Meryl. I'd like to say how excited I am to actually see this report come up, because I know that a number of councillors have felt a little bit frustrated in being able to get to the information that they need and navigating their way through the organisation, and I think that this will ease that facilitation of that process a little bit more, and I appreciate the work that's gone into the report, and I'm very happy to move the report when the time is right.
Thank you, Councillor Kransky. Councillor Murphy, followed by Mayor Power.
Thank you, through the chair. Meryl, I'd like to thank you as well. As my division has 32 facilities plus 2 pools, it certainly makes my job a hell of a lot easier to coordinate and work with the sports, leisure and facilities team to get things done in my area. So thank you very much for making this happen.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Mayor Power.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It might be a little bit indulgent, but can I actually ask who what company provided the legal advice to the ARGs that were approved with the administrator?
Through the chair, I'm actually not sure of that. Councillor Power could follow that up to find out who that legal advice was from.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or discussions? No. I would have to agree with Councillor Kransky's messages and that sort of thing, and I would like to thank you for these amendments. Councillor Kransky has moved the motion on the screen. Thank you. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Murphy has seconded that motion. I will now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been voted unanimously. Thank you. I will now refer to item 6.2, and before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? No? There being none, I will now refer to Acting Corporate Governance Manager, Ms Meryl Burke, to please proceed and open discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the purpose of this report is to meet the Local Government Act 2009. It's a requirement that we conduct an annual review of all of our delegations from the local government to the Chief Executive Officer. So this review includes the powers that have been delegated from the local government to the mayor. So as you can see from the report, there's a number of minor amendments in regards to the delegations. These were considered in a councillor briefing session that was held on the 28th of October. Along with the minor amendments, some of the recommendations refer to the investigation of a technology solution in the future and to also look at continual improvement opportunities. And that's to ensure that the delegation of authority are delivered in a more user-friendly way, a format and integrated in regards to part of our induction and training programs and are easy to maintain.
Thank you, Ms Burke. I will now open the floor to councillors for discussion. Does anyone have any questions they would like to ask? No? There is a motion on the screen, councillors. Do I have a mover for this motion? Mayor Power has moved the motion. Do I have a seconder for this? Councillor Bannon has seconded. Do any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? No? I will now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Mayor Power, are you voting in favour? That has been carried unanimously. Thank you. I will now refer to item 6.3, and before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, I now refer to the Acting Corporate Governance Manager to open public discussion. Ms Burke, you may proceed.
Thank you. So item 6.3 refers to the Procurement and Appropriations Special Committee meeting that was held on the 1st of December, and that the recommendations are that the special committee meeting held on that be tabled, and that any recommendations that were held on there as attached in the recommendation of city governance be adopted. I'm not sure if Councillor Jeremiah wanted to talk in regards to that meeting yesterday.
Madam Chair, I yield my time.
Okay. Are there any other questions? No? There is a motion on the screen. Do I have a mover for this motion? Councillor Jeremiah has moved the motion. Do I have a seconder for this? Mayor Power has seconded the motion. Do any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? No? I now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you. That marks the end of the Corporate Governance Manager's report. Is there any other general business for Ms Burke? No? Ms Burke, do you have any general business for us?
No, I don't.
There being none, I will now move on to the next item. Thank you, Ms Burke. I will now refer to item 7.1, and I invite Acting Road and Water Infrastructure Director Darryl Riley to please enter the discussions. Before we open discussions on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? No, we'll just wait just a minute. Mr Riley, over to you to open discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The report tabled today is in regards to a caretaker's cottage which was at the Marsden Depot. The cottage was built in the early 1970s. It was for the caretaker. At that point in time, in 2018, under our normal operations at the depot, it became apparent that it was in a poor state of repair. It was actually highly built with asbestos, and it was going to cost a significant amount of money to actually maintain that. There was a business assessment done at that stage in regards to what to actually do with the building, and the building was subsequently removed. It was done via contract, which went through a public tender space and utilised appropriate contractors for removal of asbestos material. Having removed the material, which is why I'm here today, and then actually looked to remove that asset from Council's asset register, it became apparent that the residual value actually being carried by that asset was in excess of $40,000. Under Council's policy in regards to removal of assets from our asset register, assets in excess of $40,000 actually require consideration by Council and an approval from Council to remove them from the register. Hence why we've brought a report to bear today, requesting for Council's approval retrospectively for the caretaker's shack, which has actually been removed, and the space actually made in the depot for other operations. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. I will now open the floor to councillors for discussions, and I have Councillor Kransky followed by Councillor Stemp. Councillor Kransky.
Thank you, Daryl. I can't actually recall another time where I've seen a report quite like this one come up to Council. I'd like to commend you on your openness and transparency in bringing this up in this forum. My question to you today is, if councillors don't support the retrospective removal of this building, what would the outcome be?
Through you, Madam Chair. We can't put the building back. Most of it, which was asbestos, will actually be at Willawong at this point in time, having gone through appropriate disposal process. At the moment, it's being carried on Council's books as a financial asset, which would continue to be carried there until such time as a decision is made that we can remove it from the asset register. The main outcome from today's decision will be that we can actually remove it from Council's asset register, so it'll be removed from the financial statements.
As I said, I approve or applaud you bringing it up in an open forum, and none of us are perfect, and I'm sure that every good intention was followed here, and I understand that sometimes things need to be corrected, so thank you for answering that Dorothy Dix question.
Thank you, Councillor Kransky. Councillor Stemp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my question is, why can't we just write off the asset as part of the recommendation? Why do we need to endorse the actual removal of the building when it's already gone? Like, I understand the 2 points. I'm just curious as to why we can't just be endorsing, well, basically, number 2.
In terms of the way that the policy is actually written around disposal of assets, it actually requires the approval for the disposal of the asset. So to be in compliance with the policy of Council, it's actually an endorsement for the disposal of the asset. The following step from that is, having disposed of the asset, we can then actually move that from the register. So in bringing it to say that we can actually dispose of the asset, actually keeps Council in compliance with its own policy.
Thank you, Councillor Stamp. Councillor Hall?
Look, I'm supportive of whenever Council does something in the interest of public health and safety. I think it's actually good that you got it out of the way before having to, deal with some of the bureaucracy involved. It's better that it be removed, having asbestos and whatnot, and not being a risk to the community. So I'm happy to endorse what you've done here.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Fraser?
I was wondering, when did council officers realise that this process had to be completed where we are right now?
I'm not entirely sure of that. I know that I've only been aware of it for a short period of time. It certainly, I think, would have played out when we actually did an audit on the actual depot in regards to the infrastructure that we have in the depot, and it would have been apparent then that we were carrying that component of the asset. So I would imagine that we've known probably for a reasonable period, but I would imagine I would be thinking somewhere in around the 4 to 5 months space. In terms of the operation of the depot, it's not actually an ongoing issue for us. We followed an appropriate due process to be able to dispose of the asset. It really was the carrying value in the asset register that caused the grief in the end. If the asset had have been under $40,000, then it wouldn't have actually needed to come to this forum. The carrying value is based on a lineal depreciation of the asset from the time when it was originally created. I would suggest to you that while we were carrying it at $57,000, that the actual building itself may have been worth considerably less than that.
And is that $57 or nearly $58,000? Is that what it's worth right now, or is that what it was worth 2 and a bit years ago when it was demolished?
At the point that it was demolished, I believe that was the value that was attributed to it at that point. Now, my clarification on that would be that value was not based on a condition assessment or an inspection of the building. It was based on the lineal depreciation of that building from when it was created in 1997 to what it may have been worth 50 years later. And yes, certainly the building that was there, I would suggest was not of that value, but it was the carrying amount that we were carrying in Council's financial records.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you. I just have one question, or a couple of questions actually. When you're saying the asset was disposed of, was it removed, just demolished, or sold at auction?
It was demolished. We went to out for public quote to actually bring in demolition companies to actually take that out. So we looked for expertise in the market who could remove asbestos-related materials. That was not something that we had a capability to do in-house. So certainly they demolished it, and it was disposed of as you would imagine we would do for domestic waste, which would mean it would have to go to a regulated fill site for that disposal.
And just one more question. So once the asbestos was removed, before it was demolished, was there any appetite? Could we have sold it at auction, or could you not sell it because of the asbestos in it?
The asbestos was fairly heavily through that building. It was actually the cladding to the outside of the building. It really was there was no residual asset left of any value to be able to dispose of.
Okay, fair enough. Any further questions or discussion, councillors? No? There being none, councillors, there is a motion on the screen. Do I have a mover for this motion? Mayor Power has moved the motion. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hall has seconded the motion. Do any councillors wish to speak to the motion? No? I now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you. That marks the end of the director's reports. Mr. Darryl Riley, do you have any general business for us?
No, I don't, thank you.
No? Does anyone have any general business for Mr. Riley? No? Thank you. I will now move on to the next item. We have 2 late reports to consider this morning. Apologies. What we will do is I will refer to both of the late reports going into confidential. Hopefully I'm doing this right. So I will refer to our first late report, item 9.1, and our second late report is 9.2. Both have a confidential nature of them. Yep. Sorry. Would councillors like to move into confidential for either of them or both of these reports? Councillor Stemp has moved the motion. Councillor Murphy has seconded that motion.
Just point of order, that was to move into confidential for both items?
Both
or just
items,
one?
yeah.
Both
So we can
items.
talk
Thank
about both. Yes. Sorry. I note that item 9.1 and 9.2 both are confidential. It is considered necessary to take... Oh, hang on. Have I just done that bit? No. I've got to go through it. Sorry.
Yeah, if you just go through it from here.
Okay.
And for 9.2 as well, you'll have to just read out that bit, but it's also, I'll scroll through it on the screen.
It is considered necessary to take the discussion of the report 9.1 into a closed session as discussion regarding the legal proceedings is required. Do any councillors wish to move into closed session for this item pursuant to section 254J3 of the Local Government Regulation 2012 and if applicable, provide an overview of your intended discussions if it's different to the prepared motion. Can I do that one and then add the next one? Yep. And I'm going to add the next one on as well. I note that item 9.2 is confidential and it is considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session as this report includes information that is commercial in confidence and relates to contracts proposed to be made by council. Do any councillors wish to move into closed session for this item pursuant to section 254J3 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, and if applicable, provide an overview of your intended discussions if it's different to the prepared motions? I remind councillors that if there is no desire to discuss the confidential matters, there is no requirement to move into closed session. I will now open the floor to councillors, and Councillor Stamp, you are happy to move. Councillor Murphy was happy to second. Yep. I now open the floor.
Point of order,
Yes.
just before we do go to vote, just a reminder about conflicts of interest, so that if there are any, potentially we should be declaring those before we move into confidential.
Apologies, yes. Do any councillors have a conflict of interest relating to 9.1 or 9.2? No? There being none, I will now open the floor to vote to move into confidential. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. All right, councillors, there is a motion that will be put up on the screen in a minute. There's a motion on the screen for you. Do I have a mover for the motion that is on the screen? Mayor Power has moved the motion. Is there a seconder? Councillor Bannon has seconded. Do any councillors wish to speak to the motion? And this one is in regards to 9.1. 9.1. I now open the floor to vote. Please raise your hands if you're in favour. That motion has been carried unanimously.
Madam Chair, I abstained.
Oh, apologies. Thank
All
you,
good.
thank you, Councillor Herrmeyer. Okay, we will now go to 9.2, and the motion will go up on the screen. There is a motion on the screen. Do I have a mover for the motion 9.2? Councillor Murphy has moved the motion. Is there a seconder for this motion?
No.
Councillor Hall has seconded that motion. I now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That has been moved or carried. Councillor Lane, how have you voted?
Opposed.
Opposed. Councillor Lane is opposed. Councillor Kransky?
No, all fine. I'm just supportive.
Okay.
For.
All right. Everyone else was in favour of the motion. Perfect.
So, Madam Chair, did that motion carry, just to be clear?
It did, yes. Just going to where I am. That marks the end of the Director of Organisational Services, Mr. Robert Strachan's report. Do you have any general business for us? No? Does anyone have any general business for Mr. Strachan or for Ms. Sullivan? No? All right. I note that due to social distancing restrictions, not all managers or staff could attend today. That being said, does anyone have any general business for the Director of Organisational Services? Apologies that this today. No? Before closing the last City Governance meeting of 2020, I would like to wish all of our Logan residents and businesses a very happy, safe, merry and prosperous festive season and Christmas and New Year's. And that completes our agenda for today, and I declare the City Governance Committee meeting of the 2nd of December 2020 concluded at 12:54.